So I've just started the recording now. So welcome everyone to your Yoga for Scoliosis taste and info session. My name is Adeline for those I'm meeting for the first time. And just mute everyone's living room. Yeah. Okay. So this is a live session that I'm with lots of you across the screen right now. And we'll have a chance to, now I'll introduce and speak a little bit more about scoliosis and my journey and how I approach and work with scoliosis. And also we'll have a chance to practice in a moment. And therefore it's helpful if you're just joining, if there's anything that's important for me to know that you would like me to know, to put it into the chat box. I already have a couple of questions here in the chat box. Some were asking about sleeping position, also suffer from scoliosis for lower back pain. Also mentioning there are slightly different, not a lot, but slightly different approach also for growing adult, like teenagers and all, versus a matured curve adult. Sleeping patterns to avoid, yeah. Vagal tone, severity of scoliosis, okay. So quite a few very interesting questions. I hope I can get around to everyone's question. Of course, throughout, if anything does come up for you, please do again use the chat box to communicate with me. So, firstly, I would like to invite you to take a moment to sit or lie down comfortably, quietly, before I start my other bit of introduction and talking. Just taking a moment to settle. A position of comfort, you can be reclining, lying down, seated. Settling into your body. A moment of pause from all that you've been engaging a moment ago, interacting. And the practice to come. But more importantly, when you pause right here, checking in with yourself, how you're feeling right now physically. If there's any experiences, sensation that might be present, whether it's a chronic, long-term thing or it's relatively new. And also acknowledging how do you feel, your feelings, emotions right now, or if there's any mental thoughts, beliefs, ideas that you might have as you arrive. Maybe there's some idea, beliefs about scoliosis, about spinal conditions that you have heard, read before. And one important question that I'd like you to take a moment to internalize is, what brought you here? What's your intention for showing up, taking time, which is precious, taking time to actually sign up and to show up, to click here, for this session, or to watch this replay if you are watching the replay at some point later. What's your intention? What brought you here and your motivation? And maybe some of you teach and would like to simply learn a little bit more about this condition. Quite a few of you may, like me, live with this condition called scoliosis. And of course, all the accompanied experiences. And officially welcoming yourself here to this moment, an intimate moment with yourself. And in the next few breaths, begin to externalize so you can re-engage with my voice. Blink your eyes open, moving if you need to move, change positions. So I asked a moment ago, what was your intention, motivation for being here, for showing up? Maybe you have brought with you some questions, things that maybe you have been practicing and working and it's working really well. Maybe you are coming for some inspiration. So I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to unmute to speak or to type into the chat box if you prefer. Anyone? Of course, I've already posted some of the questions earlier. I mentioned about sleeping position. Someone asked about lower back pain, about organs like lungs and tissue that I mentioned. Did you all manage to watch the half an hour introduction to Yoga for Scoliosis video that I've explained a little bit? I hope that gives a little bit of context and introduction to how I would approach. Just checking, anything else? So before I get to specific question, while some of you are still typing there, scoliosis to me, it's, I think I mentioned also in the introduction video, at least from a yoga approach, a yoga perspective, to me, it's simply just a word that categorizes a group of people who live with a lateral curvature of the spine, usually accompanied by also rotation in the body. But somewhat to qualify to join that club, the medical profession obviously has a measurement of, it has changed a couple of times, but it has a measurement of if the corp angle is above a certain degree, then this joins the club. Like you're qualified, you join the club, scoliosis club. But to me, I was thinking to myself when I was working with lots of special needs kids and all in the past, that really a condition, it's really just a spectrum of something, a spectrum of autism, spectrum of spinal imbalances in the body. Some can be structural, I'll speak a little bit more, some can be structural, some can be functional with scoliosis. Structural is something pertaining to when we were growing, or probably when we were born with, that there is some discrepancy between the bone growth that causes the structure itself to slightly deviate from more balanced position or functionality, which is a little bit more tricky to manage just because the bone itself, the given infrastructure inside the body, it's slightly compromised. Whereas if it's a functional scoliosis in general, of course, there are lots of other categories also, but just in briefly, functional meaning if someone has been in a posture or position habitually over time that has been imbalanced, maybe the way you sit, maybe of carrying heavy load, like carrying children for like 2-3 years of sitting on one hip, maybe carrying like heavy load on the shoulders, or your profession. So I've also worked with professional violinists where they spend 6 to 8 hours every day just like in this position, right? So you can imagine being in this position for 6 to 7 hours a day. I mean, even if it's for like really straight spine, what could potentially happen to the tissue, the organs that reorganizes in that position, in that posture. And that gradually, for some might develop some imbalances within the body. Some eventually might have like what we call functional scoliosis, because functionally it served the purpose of, or at least the position of being in that shape, right, in that position. And therefore, if there's any neck tension, shoulder tension, I think it's pretty straightforward why that can happen. Also, I wanted to mention briefly also about the about pain, because some of you asked about lower back pain and other things. And in fact, I have a whole module just on like pain management and sensation, working with sensation. But one thing, most importantly, and it's also really important for our practice in a moment, is that I believe that pain is simply an intense sensation that we don't like, that is difficult in the body or discomfort in the body. But it is a sensation. And the thing is, sensation is the only language of the body. It's the only way how your body communicates to the brain, saying that, hey, this part of the area of the body is under strain, is under stress or overworked. Do something about it. It's basically communicating so that you can take action or what to take out of that sensation. So that area might be asking you to simply massage it and just give it a little bit of a rub. Or is the sensation asking you to just reorientate and change position, whether to lie down and rest on relaxed the area of discomfort or loaded area? Yeah, does it make sense what I was saying about that sensation? But sometimes, yes, it could be very intense. It could be a very strong sensation, especially some sensation that has been there repeatedly over time. That is not just like one-off, but every time it's just, I can resonate with that myself. It's often the same area that's like day in, day out. If anything, it's just my left side lower back that's aching and all. Or it could be your right side shoulder. That's often the same area. Then why does that keep repeating itself? It's another like interesting question that I've been investigating and understanding in my practice. So when I practice, most of the time I'm able to release, and I'm sure some of you probably find some position or stretches or practices. Some of you might heard of other methods called Enquiries or somatic practicing, somatic movements. But why does it keep repeating? It's where even when we manage to relieve it with certain stretches or position, that if our daily posture or our daily activity continue to encourage that same posture. For example, if your day requires you just a lot of like leaning to one side, if your computer is on this side and you have to keep like working this side, or probably you have to carry a young child often on your hip on one side, despite the hours of yoga or stretches and things that you do on the mat, then that will be the posture and position that you would assume after your hour of practice, that continue to becomes chronic, because it repeats itself, because there's something else off the mat that has been encouraging the same pattern. Does it make sense? Yeah, does it make sense? How are you? Yeah. And maybe as I'm speaking right now, if there's anything that come up for you, feel free to communicate with me, put it into the chat box, as I'm also reading some of your comments. Yeah, thank you, Helen. Yes, I did a talk with Yoga Berry, Christine. She has been my longtime student, so she has worked with me for many years. And I'm so glad that she's doing this on Facebook. And learn about the condition, new yoga teacher, to help others live with scoliosis. Yeah. And fit together to help live with scoliosis, chronic condition. When I see the word chronic, there must be something that, firstly, my question is, were you able to relieve it at some point, even if it's just for half a minute, 1 minute? If you're able to relieve it, meaning there is hope, meaning that sensation is not permanent resident in the body. There were some moment that it finds comfort and at least reduce sensation in the area. And when I hear the word chronic, it's probably, again, just a moment ago, what I was describing, there must be something else that is exacerbating, that repeating that pattern, and therefore they sense strong sensation in the body. So I would definitely look at proprioception. Again, as I'm speaking, I'm just thinking like these are literally all the core modules I wanted to bit by bit introduce and share with everyone. I would definitely look at the module on like core proprioception, look at postures and position, the module on posture and position. Proprioception is because if we already pre-existingly have a slightly skewed idea or sensation of how the body orientates itself in space or activities, or when we are walking, standing up and walking, naturally that is being assumed throughout the day that we're unconscious about. And when we readjust, or I call it recalibrate the proprioception, because as much as we can straighten the spine, we can like find balance within the imbalance in the body, structurally or functionally, that if the body hasn't shifted its proprioception, it will still think that it's straight. Being in that position, it will still think that, oh yeah, I've just done my release work, and without looking at the mirror, this is like, to me, still relatively straight and convenient. So proprioception is really important component that I include in my rehabilitation, at least, and how do I bring it into more of a longevity in terms of a healing approach. Middle age, to focus on scoliosis in yoga practice. Yes, definitely. I thank you, Helen, for asking that. One of the things I wanted to highlight is, I know quite a few of you probably have been practicing yoga for a while, or probably other modalities like maybe Pilates, maybe other strengthening core work that you have been doing or practicing to help scoliosis. I think they are great, but with awareness, meaning if I have a pre-existing preference, which I'll demonstrate it in a moment when we go to the mat to practice. If we have a pre-existing preference to leaning over to one side in down dog because that side is just dominant and just stronger and it's just able to kind of support the body in that position, or planking, for example. Without awareness, we will probably be using the stronger side to do most of the support, to support that shape. Yeah, and the other side might be permanently on kind of holiday, not working as much as the dominant side. And therefore, over time, without awareness, this might potentially cause more imbalance in the body. Just because the dominant side has been just continuously be encouraged, it's just been like strengthening this area because it's just convenient to use that part of that side of the body to support the shape, especially with strengthening poses. So pay attention and have that sensitivity and awareness, which is again back down to sensation reading, like pain sensation reading, knowing where the threshold is, and also proprioception, to navigate around whether this is truly just convenient and familiar, or is this really serving me and balance in how I would work. when I say balance, it's not necessarily symmetrical. Sometimes yes, but more so in harmony as a whole, expressing movement or posture position. Pain all the time, reduce pain. Yeah, the first part of the practice in a moment, I want to focus on releasing, just dismantling uneven tension, tightness in the body. And okay, so I have a few more questions here. Daughter with scoliosis, kids growing up with scoliosis. Okay. I wanted to say one more thing from earlier. Just hold on a moment. Yeah, about the lungs and organs, which I'll also introduce it in a moment when we come into practice. But briefly, when I say how it affects, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you need more clarification there, some of you. When there's a curvature in the spine, sideways like this, you can imagine the ribs that's attached to the spine from behind and attached to the breastbone in front. So I'm side bending like this, so there's a lateral curvature. Also, of course, depends whether your curvature is higher up or lower down. Sometimes it could be a big, long C curve. Sometimes it presents itself more as an S curve, like this one way and then the other way. Some of you are familiar with your X-rays. And also I've seen very common, which is triple curve, where there is the S curve at the bottom, but also accompanied like kind of a small compensatory curve around the neck and therefore pulling the head or shoulder off center. When the curvature affects this section, the upper back section, thoracic section, the ribs are kind of skewed this way because it's attached to the spine. The spine is side bending and the ribs follow. And in that position, you can imagine that the space, just capacity space inside my left chest cavity is just much more reduced in terms of volume, in terms of its breathable space for your lung tissue compared to the other side. Of course, we want to also look at three-dimensional. So it's not just this, but with the rotation, usually whichever side is shortened, it could be my lower back that is shortened. So if this side is shortened, whichever side is shortened, right? Whichever side is shortened, that tends to push anteriorly forwards. If this side is shortened, that tends to kind of move forwards anteriorly towards the body. So right now, where you are, maybe some of you already know that one side of your shoulders behind is a little bit more protruded than the other side. I think I mentioned briefly, one is the mountain, one is the valley. It feels like there's kind of a big protrusion of the shoulders at the back and compared to the other side. The protrusion part is, I call it the mountain side, or Mr. Ayaka call it the mountain side. And the other side, I call it the valley side. And if right now you put your hands on your lower back, just like this, yeah, and really have a big hand on your lower back, wherever you are, try to sit tall with neutral spine or even stand so that you can feel your lower back. If you could feel more substantial muscle, tissue, or hardness, firmness around one side more than the other side. And if there is, so for me, I have S-curve scoliosis, right thoracic, left lumbar scoliosis. So my right waist is a little bit shorter. My left side thoracic spine is a little bit shorter. So for me, I definitely could feel a lot more bulk of tissue and almost hardened muscle around my left side lower back here compared to the other side. So the bulky side, Mr. Anga call it the mountain side, and the other side called it the valley side. And this is important because in a moment when we come to practice, I'll refer to this mountain valley side, which is for easy reference. Okay, so I know there's lots more interesting things that I want to speak about, but I'll also come back to speak about it more at the end, towards the end. But right now, I really want to get you into some experiencing and practicing so that you can really not just understand, but embody the practice. And I often want to say that although this is an hour, would love to have more time with you. So if you do need to dash off at the end of the hour, feel free to just log off. But otherwise, you can stay with me right to the end for more questions. I'll be here throughout. Okay, so let's go. So firstly, I'd like to invite you to have a big pillow, 2 big pillows positioned that way. For those of you who have watched the Yoga Berry video interview, I think did I show this one? Maybe I've shown this one in somewhere else, but definitely one of my favorite go-to release postural tension along the back. It just needs to be a big firm pillow that you have. If you have rather flat, squishy, down feather pillow, you might double it up to make it higher, but more so that it's even height that way. And I'm going to support my pelvis. So pubic bone, pelvis supported all the way. My upper body fully supported. This is a prone release position. And we'll also get a chance later to reorientate, to experience how gravity is definitely one of the key components to practicing with scoliosis, how we reorientate ourselves. So now lying on your front, just making sure that the pubic bone and pelvis, the upper body is fully supported. Turn the head to one side, whichever way is convenient for you. And the legs are just dragging on the floor behind you comfortably apart. If for any reason this position or throughout practice, any of the positions that I suggest is not appropriate for your experience or your practice, please do modify. Please feel free to depart and find a comfortable position, or maybe just observe and watch so you can really understand what I'm trying to explain before assuming the pose. Everything offered is optional. And this is also really important. Earlier I mentioned, pay attention to sensation in the body. Widen the elbows so that the back shoulders feels broad and spacious. And anytime, of course, you want to turn the head one way or the other way, feel free to change, reorientate. Whilst I'll guide you through a little bit more of release here. Allow the whole body to breathe. So it's not just front chest breathing, but allowing the back body, the side body. I often like to give my body something that it feels relieving, comfortable at start, at least to release any unnecessary holding patterns, tension in the body before I introduce new patterns. I call this a process of repatterning. Because when the body is tensed, it's in pain, intense sensation in the body, it's just simply difficult for it to consume new information, to be introduced new patterns. So if I have just a couple of minutes for practice that day or that time of the day, I'll find a position that could release tension before I start mobilizing and hydrating the tissue so that it's more supple and receptive to introduce strengthening positions or stretching, elongation. So just as an experiment, so you can taste sensation in the body and difference in the body when you breathe. If you do have a thoracic curve, upper back curve, where the curvature is more along the upper spine, where the ribs are attached to, can you keep the mountain side of your arm in front of you next to your head area, and the other side, the belly side of the arm, folded back alongside the body. So for me, I'm folding my left arm back. And my right arm still forwards. Let the elbows be heavy. So when we first lie here, I was hoping to release tension more along between the front and back body modulation. Now with that slight asymmetrical adjustment with the arms, there's intention of derotation, encouraging release, but in a derotated shape. Of course, don't worry if you think that, oh, am I doing this right? Is this correct? It will, of course, I would say it will come in time when we adjust our proprioception. But for now, if in doubt, how do we train up our proprioception? If in doubt, try the opposite direction. So change around with the arms, bring the other arm down and swap over, one arm forwards, the other arm up. And notice how lopsided or inconvenient, or what's the experience when the arms are kind of the other way around, so that you can give a chance for your body to express itself. And at least initially just slowing down so that you could really hear the subtlest information that your body might be offering. But for now, I know we could stay a lot longer in this position. I could easily stay like 15 minutes here in this position. But for now, deepen your breath. Rest your forehead in neutral for a breath or two before you support yourself back and up into all fours. And in all fours, folding back into child's pose. If that's comfortable for your knees and ankles, fold back into child's pose. But keep your forehead, elbows, and forearms fully supported on the pillow in front of you. Make space for your face and nose to breathe. If this doesn't work for your legs to fold back, you can also sit cross-legged or sit on a chair and come forwards with a rounded spine. So this is an option to come into flexion. But for those of you who are in child's pose, just really enjoying that opening along the sides of your body. And this is the moment. Did you feel more sensation on one side than the other? Where is the location of the sensation? Is it more on one side, higher up, lower down? Does it feel surface under the skin, or does it feel deeper inside? And often when I talk about prana in yoga, flow of energy flow in the body, when there's an area that you feel that is like almost hardened, it's less breathable or less responsive to your breath, that's the area maybe there's lack of prana or lack of flow and juiciness in the area. So see if you could just allow your breath, just like fluids, liquid, just seeping into the area. Just like an area that's very dehydrated, seeping water, fluids into the area with your breath. And notice that gentle widening, broadening across the whole of your lower back in all directions. Again, noticing sensation happening in different parts of the body, the intensity of it, how would you describe it? And slowly coming up to sitting. Separate the bolster so that there's a little gap space in between. And maybe bring in a towel or a blanket so that you can support your neck more comfortably. It's really just for your neck comfort. And I'm going to support. So this is the part we're going to go asymmetrical with this position. So pay attention to which is the side. That's your mountain side and valley side. I'm going to lie on my mountain side. So I have a S curve where my right side shoulder blade is more protruded, mountain side of my right shoulder blade. So I'm going to lie on my right side. So if it's the opposite for you, then you lie on the other side. Okay. Of course, we'll go to both sides. Don't worry, you won't hurt yourself because we're gonna go into both sides, but just with different focus. So I'm gonna lie with my side body supported. It's somewhere between my armpit and my waist with a pillow. And this green blanket that I have is supporting my neck, more for comfort because I want to be here for a while. The knees are quite high up, lower legs forwards. Feel free to add a blanket or pillow between the legs if that's more comfortable. And take the top arm over the head, either on your head, on the pillow, or if that's not easy for your shoulders today, then grab another kind of regular pillow in front to support your arm. Yeah. Here in this position, we are intentionally, consciously condensing, releasing the underside, the side that is being supported against the pillow, so that we can encourage space, breathability into the top side. And notice the lung tissue is not just left and right, but there's also thickness front back. So notice the volume of your chest and lung tissue as you breathe. You're encouraged to breathe only very gently, not to the top of your breath. So don't try to over breathe too much. It's just easy, comfortable breath throughout. And notice if you could breathe into the front chest as much as the back chest on this, for me, left side. And trying to get to every corner of your, for my left lung tissue, for you, depends on which side you're lying on, the top side of your chest tissue. And notice if there are areas which are more breathable or less breathable, because in a moment we'll compare it to the other side so that the next time we come back to practice, we can be more attentive to this adjustment. Again, this is a position you can easily stay. If you're practicing on its own yourself, you can easily stay for 5 to 10 minutes on one side. We're basically reorganizing, not just stretching the muscle, but reorganizing the content inside the chest. I call it the furniture inside the body. So we are reorganizing the lung tissue, reshaping. Carefully release the top arm. At some point, roll over to the other side. I think is how I educate my body to know whether this is right or wrong. Am I hurting myself? Because that's also a big question when I practice initially with scoliosis. I was afraid there might be one side of twisting, one side of turning, that might injure myself. So how I figure out, without asking like 1,000 questions about every pose, is to just do it and pay attention if one side feels more familiar, convenient, or is it really pain? So I don't want to go there if it's straining the body. So lying on your other side now, whilst I'm explaining, lying on your other side, again, make sure the armpit and your underneath arm is in between the gap. Support your neck fully. Draw the knees high. And the top arm over the head or in front of you, as long as we are opening the top side. and supporting the underside. Gently breathing into the full dimension of your lung tissue on this side. And I was saying earlier that maybe one side feels more convenient, but of course, if it's straining the body, your breath will tell you that you're straining the body because it's not sustainable. But rather, if it's simply unfamiliar, the sensation is rather new, it's just hard to breathe into, difficult to breathe into the area, see if you could give it at least 10 breaths before you decide if the sensation is escalating or is it just shifting gradually. And that's how I could open up potentials in the body in terms of my movements, in terms of my positions, postures. And just for a few more breaths here, noting how you feel on this side in terms of sensation, in terms of breathing. And with an asymmetrical body presentation, we might require asymmetrical attention, or at least when we are in asymmetrical positions, to pay attention to one side, spending more time on one side than the other. But for now, let's roll onto your back. So we're coming back into a more symmetrical position. So a moment ago, we were asymmetrical. We were on one side and then the other side. Now coming back to symmetry, just supporting the back of your chest with a pillow, and the arms are in between the gap. Legs can be straight or bent. Just a few moments here to give equal attention to both left and right side. To reorientate, I call it re-educating the body to this potential space, place. Because the body learned through sensation, tasting the movement, tasting the position. That even if we read like 10 anatomy books, the body doesn't learn that way through like a PhD in anatomy. Slowly releasing, roll over to your side and push the pillows away to one side. And lie on your back with no props. If anything, you can have a little blanket under the head. If the chin is really sticking up, then have a little blanket pillow for your head. Hands on your belly. Knees bent, feet hip width apart. Take a moment to sense and feel your back body contact against the firm surface. This has to be done on a firm surface, so it's rather difficult to perceive when you are on a soft bed or sofa. So make sure you're on a firm ground. And slide your hands a little bit down so that you can feel your front hip bone. So the bone that sticks out the most in front of your hip. And just feel if you could sense and feel if there's one bone that sticks out more than the other. If you could feel the bony prominence under one hand fingers than the other. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they're pretty even. Which tells us that there might be some asymmetry, rotation, or at least some discrepancy, imbalance. With or without scoliosis, it is imbalance. Reset your pelvis on the floor a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times, so that you can find a little bit more even protrusion of your hip bone. Just there. And slide your hands now behind your lower back without arching your spine, so you could feel the gap space behind the small of your back. And see if you could sense and feel any difference in terms of space. One side might feel like there's a bigger gap away from the floor, or the other side might feel that it's almost touching the floor.
if there is a lateral curvature and rotation in the lower spine, the mountain side and the valley side of the lower curve. Release your hands and slide your hands in front on the front rib, lower rib, and see if you could feel the bony prominence of the floating ribs just under the breast tissue. If there is one side of the bone is more prominent, that you can feel it more than the other, might again tell us there might be some discrepancy, rotation in the chest, upper back, spine. And releasing. So now that we know there's a few things, those are just a few information that we have gathered, that there is some discrepancy. Hands can stay on the belly or out to the side. Secure your feet so that it's good for weight bearing. We're going to come into bridge pose, but bridge pose with just pelvis an inch off the floor, not too far, just pressing into your feet and come off 1 inch. Releasing. And then come up 1 inch again and pausing there. We're going to hold it so that we can reach almost the threshold of what your body could manage. Because it's usually when we are strengthening, we know that this is strengthening some part of the buttocks, hips muscles, the abs, the leg muscles as well. But at the threshold, the body is going to start to compensate. It's going to start to lean onto one leg more than the other. Maybe it's already happening right now or right at start. Just notice if there is one leg that is pushing into the floor more than the other in order to suspend your pelvis this way. How do we know? If in doubt, try shifting the weight a little bit more into your left foot. Try shifting the weight a little bit more into your right foot. And notice if there is a preference, if there's a habit that it's convenient for you to be in bridge pose. And how do you find a little bit more even pressure under your left and right foot? And notice that the parts of the maybe pelvis, buttocks, lower back that needs to engage a little bit more in order to be more balanced if there is already pre-existing imbalance in the lower spine. Of course, pause, release the pelvis down whenever to take a moment before you work with this again, repeat the pose. But as you're repeating your bridge pose, I'll continue to speak one more thing before we move on, is that you can imagine if repeatedly we're doing Setu Bandhasan, bridge pose here, without that awareness of one leg is actually pushing into the floor more than the other, that stronger buttock, that stronger side of the quadris lumboris, lower back muscles, the thighs, the quads, might just be developing stronger over time. And the other side is just like tagging along. So find evenness. And this requires, again, sensitivity to the sensation in your body and slowing down. Releasing when you have enough. Feet wider than hip width. Arms can be out to the side, shoulder height, just to make a little bit more space across the chest. And gently shift the weight over to your right pelvic half so you can feel heavy on your right pelvic half. And then slowly cross midline sacrum over to the left pelvic half. This, I often use different of these positions to educate sensation reading so that you're more sensitive to the subtler sensation. Coming across sacrum and over to the right pelvic half. And gradually increasing the range so that you can gradually go a little bit further, but not floppy. You're not just letting the legs fall or collapse to one side. So be really mindful of your movement, that as you shift, you're really paying attention to the slightest resistance or stretch, maybe along your front part of your abdomen, hips, or is it more in your lower back or mid back, upper back? Which side, left side, right side might feel different. Pay attention. Maybe different area, or is it more surface or deeper? If there is discrepancy between the left and right side, obviously, in terms of sensation, then obviously there is some discrepancy in terms of muscular behavior underneath. And you can imagine the organs that's living within this neighborhood around this area. that might be slightly more compressed or lack of space than the other side. Coming back to center when you have enough, take a moment, pause, draw both knees into the chest, hands on your knees, and gently rocking from side to side. Another lovely position to release uneven tension along the back. So all these, so far quite a few, yeah, apart from the bridge pose I've been introducing, is to find relief and release before we start now moving into more mobilization and strengthening. So carefully roll over to your side, coming into kneeling, all fours position. And I just wanted to say I might take a little bit more time here. If anyone needs to dash off, namaste, just bear with me, because I really wanted to share much more slowly this part of the practice with you. But there's always the replay if you want to come back later. So coming into all fours position, hands are under your shoulders. So from here, a little cat-cow. So I know this is probably something familiar that you probably have done many, many, many times in different classes, practices. But see if you could feel it. Close your eyes if that's comfortable, to feel your cat-cow rather than to do your cat-cow. So instead of mechanically muscling your way, sense and feel the sensation of your back body. Sense and feel the integration of the whole spine from head to tail as you move. So it's not just doing the shape, flexion, extension. You feel it right through the neck, right down to the tail. And whichever side is your belly side in your upper back, the belly side of your upper back, for me, is my left side, left side back lungs. I'll need to push into my left hand a little bit more to increase volume in my back as I round, as I continue my cat-cow. So I'll push into my left hand a little bit more. If in doubt, don't worry. Again, try pushing into your right hand and notice how it feels, whether it's actually finding more balance in that adjustment, or is it more lopsided? Whereas if there is a valley in the lower spine, lumbar spine, I might really need to lean over to that knee more. So whichever valley side, we're going to add more pressure into that hand or that knee as you go into flexion, cat-cow. So this is a symmetrical movement, cat-cow. Yeah, we're not doing one side and the other side, but I'm really giving asymmetrical attention to my sides adjusting. Which means in a moment when we come into downward facing dog, let's go when you're ready. So hands positioned a little bit forwards, unfolding into down dog a couple of times. You can unfold and descend a couple of times before you hold the position for a few breaths. And when you're holding in down dog at some point, notice now that we're really fully loading the body, loading the arms and legs at least, notice how the body is beginning to have preferences in terms of leaning over to one side more than the other. I would generally give the instructions of pay attention to your belly side of the upper back so that you're not shying away from the effort. So for me, left hand needs to probably push into the floor a little bit more, keeping that open space to breathe along the left side. And also opening the sides of my waist equally, left and right. So if I know one side of my waist is shortened, maybe draw that hip a little further back. Doesn't matter if it looks asymmetrical, but it needs to initially feel and re-educate before we could come to more symmetrical position. At least how it looks like aesthetically. And coming down anytime before you go up again, at least once more in your down dog. So this time when you go up, see if you could already push into the belly side of your hand. For me, my left hand, I would actually push into my left hand a little bit sooner before my right hand engages as I unfold into down dog. So that I'm already encouraging the pattern right at the beginning, right in the first part of the loading. And releasing, coming down. Take a moment, pause in child's pose. As you fall forwards into child's pose, pausing. Child's pose is flexion, so thighs relatively close but not touching, just a little space between your legs for your belly and your heart. Support the sides of your body on your thighs. Notice now, pay attention if you have more of one side of your chest resting on the thigh than the other, between your right and left side. So if, again, there is an asymmetry in the thoracic spine, the upper back spine, more than likely, you might be resting more, for me, more of my right chest conveniently on my right thigh, less of my left chest on my left thigh. So I might need to rotate a little bit more so my left chest feels more supported on my left thigh. And notice how you could breathe into your back body, supporting the back lungs, especially this left side, a little more. And slowly coming back, unfolding into your downward dog one more time. This time we're going to add plank pose, which again is another strengthening position. I think it's so popular in like back strengthening classes and also with scoliosis and all, side plank, full plank pose. But I want to really highlight when we are loading the body this time. Half plank would be knees on the floor, or full plank, you can have your knees off the floor. But either way, this is going to be heavily loading and showing up any discrepancy and pattern right at the threshold. So hold it there and notice the body at what point that it starts to compensate and lean. That is when you need to come away and come out. It's time to come out from the pose. So we want to adjust so that we have symmetrical effort between the left and right side. Notice, for me, I'll need to push into my left hand a little bit more to support my left chest, left lung at the back especially. And also be mindful if my one side of my hip, my front hip, is sinking towards the floor more than the other, in which case, can you support that hip a little bit back? And if in doubt, this is what I also do for myself, because I would use props to educate my body. So if in doubt, when I'm in this half plank position, I could probably feel how much a little bit of my thighs touching the block on one side more than the other, right? Which means I can tell if one side is kind of falling forwards more than the other, shying away from the break. This is a little bit not enough. I'll probably make it a little bit higher for my plank pose. So I hope that's okay that we are going slowly so that I can also have a chance to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing, instead of just going through poses and positions. So when I'm in half plank that way, I can feel if one side of my hip is falling forwards more than the other. The block is not for me to lean, but to give me information. So props can be for support and also to educate, to repattern. So try couple of plank pose. Notice your arm support, which side, left and right. And of course, take a pause, fall back into child's pose whenever, and pay attention this time into your child's pose, because we suggested some adjustment to your chest, supporting on your thighs. Yeah, you want to support evenly both sides of your chest on your thighs, if there's any discrepancy. And really encourage a little bit more volume and breathability into the belly side of your back. If in doubt, again, if you put your hands around your lower back, lower quadris lumboris, lower back area, one side might feel more fuller in your hands than the other side. So the other side is the belly side. So encourage a little bit more breathability there. You can release your hands once you have kind of make a note of that. And releasing, coming back into all fours. Let the spine slide, glide in any direction. Maybe hula hoop circling your waist. Releasing through movements. Sideways, up, down. And for this part, I'd like to encourage you to really go for it. Dance with your spine, take it away, especially less familiar movements. If you find yourself kind of repeating a movement of side bending or forward back, then surprise yourself with something else, because the body tends to gravitate towards what's convenient, what's already inhabited in the body. So a process I called habituation, which is part of the self-practice series. When we build a self-practice, how do we inhabit? It's through changing patterns, things that are less convenient and comfortable, not pain and strain, but just inconvenient. So move the spine in a way that it's unfamiliar, but definitely not pain or strain. Releasing, and take a moment to pause, slide forwards onto your tummy, onto your front chest. We'll quiet down now, just a short practice here. You can support your forehead with your hands turned up or down. This has a very similar effect to when we were lying on the two pillows, bolster at start. But without the pillow, it does offer a little bit more elongation and stretch than releasing. As you lie here, just noticing how much of your front hip bone is digging into the floor, left side, right side. Could you arrange it to be more even? And notice sensation that accompanies that adjustment after. Legs comfortably apart. Maybe you notice one side of your chest have more pressure against the support surface than the other. Maybe you want to adjust and reorientate so that it's more even across the left and right chest. And notice what happens to the spine when you make those little adjustments, which without awareness that we might just repeat ourselves in lying on our front whenever. And as you pause here, ask yourself, as you come towards the end of the practice, ask yourself, what is your relationship with this word, scoliosis? What is your relationship with this body? And in the next few breaths, again, we could take a lot more time here. But when it's easy for you, carefully make a transition to support yourself back and up into sit. Thank you for practice. Namaste. Thank you. I'm happy to take some questions now. And how are you feeling? If there's one word to express your experience of your practice, a rather short practice, but at least hopefully there's one or two things that you have managed to pick from here. I know I have a couple more questions from earlier, which we can discuss it now. Of course, I know it's time. If anyone needs to go, please do. I'll make sure I send the link to you, but I wanted to also answer questions for if there's anything personal, and also if there's any question about the program, the online program, the modules that I was speaking about earlier. Okay. So of course, you can use the chat box, or if you'd like to unmute to speak, you can have your video on or off as you wish. So there was a question about vagal tone. So vagal tone is pertaining to the autonomic nervous system. Whether there is or not scoliosis, when the body is under strain, when it's under stressed, it does that the nervous system will have to regulate itself. Right? And if the body is constantly under strain, to me, when there is an asymmetrical position that the body constantly have to work hard and right at the threshold of working hard to just to maintain my daily activities and movement and position, just to stand up and walk, in some way it does stress the system. So I see it as that mechanically actually tightening on the vagal tone. Vagal tone is more a nerve thing than a piece of muscle and things. Yeah. Does it help? I think Core asked the question. Does it help? Or if you need a more detailed thing, feel free to email me separately, and I could probably have a conversation with you. Yeah. How's your practice, everyone? And also, it's really important for me, working with scoliosis, to practicing, is to see it as not as something to be fixed. It's not something that I see when I ask right at the end, what is your relationship with scoliosis? And for the longest time, initially when I come to this practice, I often think that, okay, how do I straighten it? How do I fix it? How do I get rid of the curvature and things? Scoliosis is not, it's simply a condition that one lives with. And many people might live with just like a small deviation of it. And like I said, right at the start, it's just a spectrum of deviation of the spine. But as soon as I recognize that it is not a disability, but rather it is what it is as my potential, this is my potential within this body, then I can work in harmony with this body than trying to fix it as if it's a damaged goods. Because I'm just working to my threshold and my limit from moment to moment, which may change, which I've seen it change in myself and in lots of my students, other students. And a little bit about what I've done for myself also. Some of you have heard different interviews that I've given that I could share with some of you if you email me. That when I was much younger, I'm talking about like teenager, young teens, and also in my 20s, rightly, we might think that at that age is probably most active and is most probably in terms of strength, in terms of agility and all. I was just doing nothing. I couldn't engage with any sports. I just couldn't get myself to do any racket sports or any basically outdoor things. I'm just often just in the library. I'm often just in the library because it's just painful and it's just inconvenient in my body to exert in any way. And I cannot imagine the things. I cannot imagine the things that activities and sports and things that I can do now at a much later, like 20, 30 years later, down the line. That rightly, the curvature for many who haven't really paid attention to it might have increased or caused more discomfort. But rather, I've just landed myself in like horse riding. I do horse riding at like in my 30s. I pick up horse riding. It wasn't when I was a teenager. I started spin classes, which is quite intense. It's like you just get on the bike and just like spin your way. And those are kind of high intensity but low impact. Low impact is important because if I need slowness in order for me to be able to adapt and respond to my aware of and respond to the asymmetry and imbalances so that I can be more centered. And that requires time and calibration. So I'll just need to slow down. If there's a high impact, then there's a lot more jarring on the joints, on the spine. So there's very little I can manage when it's high intensity and high impact at the same time, right? But definitely run. I generally don't prefer to run just because I'm not saying no, but I would start with retraining walking. And then from the walking, like in one of the modules where we talk about like how do we pay attention to whether we are walking in harmony and supporting the body and organs as with sleeping positions and sitting positions. When we are able to walk slowly with symmetry, or at least with balance and harmony, then we can go for a brisk walk and then even faster into a little bit of a jog. And then know that running is basically an accelerated or amplified variation of walking. You're amplifying the effect of walking. So if the walking in itself is imbalanced, then it might times 2, times 5, times 10 of that impact. So I would really pay attention to the running gait, walking gait first, then running gait, and from there. Yeah. Does it help? For those that was asking between flat feet and scoliosis. It's a little bit of chicken and egg thing with the flat feet and scoliosis. Whether which one comes first, because of the curvature in the lumbar spine, therefore the hips, therefore the knee, therefore the ankle, or is it because of the flat feet not fully developed as a child when we were just beginning to stand? I do lots of studies with developmental patterns in toddler babies and all, and how that affects scoliosis also. There might be lots of pattern that was not fully developed as a child infant that could then translate into our adulthood posture and activities. So depends. I don't know. I might do a few movement assessment with the person in terms of whether it's something that we can do with the flat feet. But definitely there's a link between the two. But which one exacerbates which one is this? Yeah. Any other thing that I missed earlier? I know there was a question about sleeping position. Unfortunately, that is going to take up a lot more time to demonstrate the whole sleeping position. But definitely there are some things that I would love to share with you. Maybe if you're interested, just look at the module on sleeping positions with me, where we talk about daily postures and positions. But definitely because it contributes 7-8 hours of the day. And just because you're asleep and unconscious and asleep lying in bed, there is still gravity. The thing is, there's still gravity, and the body might be still skewed in a certain shape or position when sleeping. So if you're a side sleeper, if you're a back sleeper, and also just briefly, I wanted to show you, if I lie on my side, like this, yeah, I hope you could see like this. You can imagine for probably 7-8 hours, the space or the shortening of the tissue or muscle in one section compared to the other, or maybe the bed might sink, and depends on the firmness of your bed. If your bed is rather soft, it might kind of really accentuate that curvature on one side. And of course, it can also happen in the upper spine. So it really also depends on where the curve is, whether it's one curve or double curve. And how firm is your bed versus also the pillow. So all those components we looked at in the module in detail, but definitely great question, because it's not just on the mat that I'm talking about, like the approach that I've taken for myself, but really what I do throughout the day, including the 7 hours. I mean, to me, the whole 24 hours, the whole like time that I inhabit this body, it's my practice. I'm living with it. That's not like when I'm sleeping, I kind of checked off, signed off from it, right? So definitely, there are some things we can maybe support the underneath side so that it doesn't sink down as much into the bed, and also looking at the firmness of your bed in short. Was there anything else earlier that anyone typed in that I missed that you wanted to highlight? I know quite a few asked about pain. I think I mentioned quite a lot of things about pain and sensation. And each of those modules I have carefully kind of put together and chosen because they concentrate on that section of repatterning. And I'm not interested in just like a quick fix or an invasive thing that it's okay, just do this for 2 weeks intensively and then you'll be sorted. I'm looking at longevity, and I'm looking at something that's sustainable. It's not just during that time that I'm doing. It's something that, yes, that half an hour, and then what's next? How do I then reorientate my proprioception in order to, even when I'm going about my kitchen or going about my day, that it's embodied, it's habituated in my body. And also one most very important aspect that I put in one of the module, which is mental and emotional resilience, is when I no longer see this as a damaged goods, when I no longer see this as something that it's something that I want to fix and change, I have a much friendly, inquisitive attitude towards practicing with my back, with my scoliosis or condition. That it's really just looking for harmony in the totality of it. Then, okay, fixing it, and then what's next? Like fixing it, it just keep coming back, right? And hopefully that helps. Anything else from anyone today? Did I miss? Distressing, definitely, yeah. And that's why there is a chapter on a module on relaxation and rest. Because and I think many of you probably have read also that when we are under stress, whichever weakest link, or probably the areas that's conveniently tight, will probably exacerbate and probably gets tighter around the same area. That, I call it the weakest link, because that part of the body probably would kind of tighten sooner than the rest of the body, or the first protocol, the first point of pot of call to tighten, to respond to the stress level. So when we are able to release from stress, then it's less likely that we would repeatedly exacerbate the imbalance in the body, also physically. Therefore, there's an emotional component that accompanies this process. Yeah. Okay. So, question about stress, and then also a question about teenager. I know some of you mentioned about teenager working with younger growing adult or younger children. It's really about paying attention to, because they're still in the growth, especially if they're still growing. That's probably for me, the biggest potential that we can navigate and support the growth, so that it's less like that it could actually support a more symmetrical growth than allowing it to follow the slightly asymmetrical pattern, because it's just convenient without awareness. It's just convenient to just lean over to one side and it just continue growing that way. So definitely during that time, if I have a chance to work with, like I do have a couple of students that I'm working with at any one time, to really incorporate that into their responsibility than the parents' responsibility, because as much as we want it for the child, we want it for that person, or maybe your loved one, that's someone that you know, or your other half or something that you're thinking, we can't do it for them. That's the thing. We can't do it for another person, but that person themselves has to want it themselves. So often the first thing I ask is, how much do you want it yourself? I will speak directly to the teenager. I'll speak directly to the child, explaining to them, this is what's happening, not to scare them, but rather take responsibility, because no one can keep brushing your teeth. Like, I can teach you how to brush your teeth, but I can't be there every day to brush your teeth. And it's something of personal hygiene. And for scoliosis, it's just spinal hygiene that we need to maintain on a more regular basis. Yeah. Okay. And of course, breathing also. During our practice, I mentioned lots about breathing and how we can use breath to reorganize organs in the body, reorganize and reorientate. So why is it so important to involve the organs? Because that is where, in my mind, that's where it can allow for longevity. Because just by fixing the structure, the bone itself with a rod, it's really just mechanical in terms of the bone itself. The organs, especially if it's something that we have lived with over years, the organs has been slightly displaced or probably reshaped in a way to accommodate the rib cage or the pelvis and all. And it takes time to migrate and reorientate and repattern, reshape and reorganize the organs or the furniture inside the body, so that it can actually sit in a more harmony place. Of course, it's never going to be exactly the same left and right, because we have one heart, one liver. It's not exactly left and right the same. One eye might be bigger than the other eye. That's normal. That's natural. But at least reorganize in a way that they are healthy. The vital organs are healthy. I've seen, and also myself experienced, that when there is lack of space, especially in the abdomen, in the chest, definitely affecting the lung tissue and breathability and capacity. But in the abdomen, if there's a curvature in the lumbar spine, adult or a child, it might affect just simply blood flow and nutrients, nourishment to supply into that part of the organs. It's just lack of space for it to circulate. And used to be, I would have experienced like digestion problem, menstrual problem because of that lack of space. It's just lack prana in yoga, we call it, but yes, also literally lack of space and breathability in that area. So post-surgery, I would work with surgery or post-surgery, someone with a rod, that we can still reorientate and work with the organ and breath. Because as long as that part of your body, whether it's your lung or your kidney, as long as that part of the body is still organic and alive, there's hope. It's as long as it's not like dead, right? Then it's organic. It's still suggestible. It's still breathable. Yeah. Anything to add, anyone, before we kind of close? Any question about the program also, if anyone might be thinking and consider the program? It's very much practice based. So the 3-hour module, there'll be at least 2 practices and a small break in between the 2 practices. There'll be, of course, context. Well, I'll explain a little bit more about the module and the theory behind it and all, but very much also lots of space and pace for you to practice. And there'll be also recording available after for you to revisit and replay and practice and make notes and all. It's usually a small group program, so that I could actually interact with every individual and if there's any questions along the way. Each of those modules can be taken independently. If you're thinking just about 2 or 3 modules, feel free to do that. But of course, there's a reason why I've put those 10 modules there, because each component actually completes the whole like picture of my puzzle of what I would like to share, how I have, what has worked for me. That just taking out the postures and position part, or just taking out the strengthening part, is just not quite complete for me to experience the whole. So if you can manage, of course, do the whole thing, but otherwise feel free to take 1 or 2 of the modules also. Anything else from anyone? Yes, Claudia, would you like to speak or type, or up to you?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear?
Hang a moment.
Can you say again?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Hello. I have a question. Did I get it right that, for example, next Friday there are 2 modules?
Friday there's 1 module. That's the opening module.
Okay, and Saturday there's 2.
On Saturday 2 modules. So module 2 and 3 will be on Saturday.
Okay, and then if I cannot take part, I have 2 weeks to see the replay.
Yes.
Okay, and after those 2 weeks, the replay is deleted.
The replay will be taken down. One of the reasons why is because these replay are not public. That there's the participants. So there's a copyright issue and privacy issue with other people doing it. So you can't keep it. But I'm most happy for you to like replay, take notes, and practice a couple of times. Take notes during for that time of practice.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Every beginning is a module that is really important to set a committed intention with this approach and practice, because ultimately no one's gonna nudge you and keep asking you, get on the mat, practice for half an hour, get on. It's really about your relationship with how much do you want it. That was one of my key questions. How much do you want it yourself? Because as much as I want it for you, your loved one wants it for you, we can't do it for you. I can support you, I can keep reminding you, but it's just something that I can't practice it for you on the mat. So that is really important for focusing and having the support, mental support within. Okay, so thank you for joining me today. I hope I'll see some of you on the program. And like I said, it's intimate small groups, so we have a chance to lots of space for Q&A, lots of space to ask questions, and lots of practice time also. So I hope this session today has been helpful to give you an idea. And thank you. I'll in my email to you to send this video record link to you. I'll put in the link also for that page where you can see the schedule of the program, and also the sign up at the bottom of the page if anyone's interested. So if you can't make the live session and just watching the replay, you can email me after watching the replay, or bring the question to the next module. So that's how I have been working with previously. So I know some of you might be joining me from different time zone and all. The last program we have from New Zealand, from Singapore, from Thailand also. So yes, so you can actually send me an email question, and I can at least address it during the recorded module, and you'll have access to it. Okay. Thank you, thank you. I hope that gives you a little bit of inspiration and something to think about. Enjoy the rest of your day. It's Sunday, different time zone, different places. And I'll hope to see some of you next week. Bye.